everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Casey Bryant, and this is the Hat City Hockey Show. And Merry Christmas, everybody. We made it to the end. It's pretty pathetic when the best thing about a given calendar year is that it ended, but here we are. 2020 couldn't even leave without taking a few more parting shots. For example, Henrik Lundqvist, a future Hall of Fame goaltender for the New York Rangers who recently signed with the Washington Capitals, may be forced into a premature retirement because of a worsening heart condition. Now granted, I felt like I was going into cardiac arrest every time I had to see Mark Stahl and Nick Holden play defense together, so I can only imagine what it was like playing behind them. But in all seriousness, obviously, all the best to the King. He is a true icon of the sport and a hero to Ranger fans like myself. This is our last show of 2020, and while things are still tough and they won't magically get better once the calendar turns over to January 1st, 2021, it's important to take the victories, however small, as they come. Let's look at some silver linings for the Danbury Hat-Tricks. We started the year with a historic road trip out to Bloomington, Illinois, where we swept the defending champions. We welcomed back dozens of Danbury legends and NHL veterans with our alumni night in March. We helped raise thousands for ALS research over the summer, and you know what? We're not done working. We may be seeing our resident junior teams and pro team back in action again this month. Our resident women's pro team is heading to Lake Placid for the Isabel Cup playoffs on NBCSN. The NHL is back on January 13th. We are trying to stay positive. Our featured charity of the week is the ALS Association of Connecticut. Why not make one more push before the end of the year? Head to alsact.org and give today. Pop on some Rebecca Luker while you do it. We've got a great show for you here today. Brett Dolan is here, but first I had a chance to sit down with one of our returning Hat-Tricks players. Take a look. My first guest on the Hat City Hockey Show is one of the best players in the Federal Prospects Hockey League. He led the Hat-Tricks in scoring last year and has re-signed for his second campaign. Please welcome number 10, Carter Shinkaruk. Carter. I like the painting over your shoulder. Who did that?
Yeah, I don't know what this one's about, but
well, I meant the jersey.
Oh, Eric, yeah. I think I should probably be sticking to hockey, but we did one of those like pints and pixels or whatever with this is when I was in Evansville, and I think I had like my shoulder was blown out, so I had to draw with my left hand, which made it even tougher. So
I've got my festive ugly sweater on.
It's a great sweater, something I wouldn't be seen wearing around public or in the comfort of my own home. But
so Carter, what have you been doing to keep sane throughout this whole process? What have you been reading, watching, listening to that has kind of kept you going through this whole quarantine?
I guess kind of the big thing that's kept me busy the last X amount of months is I started this training or fitness for youth. We've been rolling for 2-3 months now, and it's been pretty rewarding just seeing kids develop and athleticism, kind of get to socializing with their friends because there's not a whole lot to do. We were outside in the summer because the weather was nice, and then we were inside because we live in Canada. It gets a little cold, but then with the orders, we had to be outside. So just kind of been adjusting to those obstacles and kind of keep plugging away, which I think is what a lot of people are doing right now.
And they're certainly learning from one of the best. You had yourself a great 2019-20 season where you were voted by the fans our team MVP. You were voted fan favorite, which is ordinarily saved for someone who's knocking out some teeth on a weekendly basis. So that's kudos to you in that regard. And you were listed by the league as one of the top forwards in the league. How would you evaluate what was a very prolific campaign for you?
Last year was special for so many reasons, and right when I got there day one, which was about a month or so into the season, you could tell eyes were on the prize. It's an easy cliche as we're in it to win it. Every single year I think everyone has that goal, but you kind of can feel when a team's special and they actually mean it. So it was a perfect year. Like Billy did a phenomenal job coaching. We had great fan support. We were winning a bunch of games. Like, really, what else do you want in a season, right? Everyone had solid years, which goes hand in hand with winning. So they truly care about each other on the team from last year. And like our group chat's been blowing up all summer. And, with some seasons, you have a season and people are talking a lot, and then the season ends and, it kind of goes dead for a little bit. like we're every single day that thing's going off, like pretty much all day. So
you mentioned that, everyone in the locker room had a really good year, which is very true. Does it get to be where like you're starting to have internal competition with each other? Because at different points, you had a double-digit game point streak. Gordy Bonnell had a double-digit game point streak. Johnny, Nicola, Phil, you're all stringing together these really great runs. Does it get to be a point where like, hey, I'm closing in on you. I got the lead in goals now. We're going back and forth.
If it is competition, it's healthy competition. Like, it's almost motivating for someone, like say you're ahead by someone by a goal or something, be like, okay, you got to catch up, or say you do catch up, be like, hey, it's nothing like sinister by any means. Like we're not like, I think if you ask anyone on the team, like no one really cares like, oh, I led goals this season, or I led assists, or the one thing that people might want is PIMs or plus minuses or something like that. We're pretty balanced, all our lines, but the first line might be scoring 3 goals, the third line might be scoring 3 goals. We were so deep that someone was going to have a good night that night. It was just kind of inevitable.
One of those guys who had a great year was Shane Morrissey, who is someone that you've been teammates with before at the SP level. And when he came together, you guys were immediately paired up on the top line. It seemed like you made an immediate impact. You scored together on your first goal.
Colin Porter will get it out to Shinkaruk, crosses the way, taking a step in is Morrissey. His shot, he scores! Shane Morrissey with his first goal as a hat trick, a power play goal. It's 4-2.
So what was that connection like on the first line? I imagine that having that previous experience with Shane helped in that chemistry.
Yeah, Mo has been a good buddy of mine throughout my pro career, and it's kind of funny. Like we've played for different coaches, different teams, different leagues, and we kind of seem to be on the same team each other at some point. So if something happened where I got traded or he got traded, I'm sure we would somehow find a way to be teammates again. But when you know someone for a couple of years, like it's kind of it's instant chemistry, and I think our styles complement each other. So he's incredibly skilled, and you can just kind of give him the puck and let him do his thing, and get open, and he'll find you. So it's easy to play with players like that. And
before you got to the pros, you spent your collegiate tenure at Elmira College in upstate New York. Elmira obviously being the home of the Enforcers in this league. So while you were in Elmira, did you get a taste of what Elmira fans can be like while you were up there?
Yeah, there was a couple fans that I knew from my time playing college. Like we didn't play at the first arena. So the first arena is the rink that the Enforcers play at. We played we call it the Domes, which is like just a great college atmosphere. So it was weird because we were there for Thanksgiving, and we actually drove through Elmira College campus. So as I'm driving through, it was just it brought back some good memories, and it's kind of weird when you call somewhere home and then it's not home for you. You're in a way like opponent. So it was a neat experience. The fans in Elmira, they're nothing like the Danbury fans, but they do like their hockey, and Elmira does have good attendance. So yeah, special weekend for sure. And we won, so even better.
That always makes everything better.
Elmira was when we started our 11-game win streak. It was that weekend.
Speaking of the streak, you got the overtime winning goal that cinched the streak against Watertown, because that was a back and forth game. We actually just celebrated the anniversary of that game yesterday at the time of filming, a couple of days ago when this airs. So when that goal goes, are you guys aware of what's at stake when that game is going on?
Like when I think a team goes on like a 5 or 6 game win streak, they don't even kind of notice it. It's when you get to the 7, 8, 9, closer to double digits. And we knew that, when we were at like 7 or 8, that the record was 10. We're trying to get to 10, but we're trying to get more. Like you want to win every single game, right? So it wasn't like, okay, let's get to 10 and then we're done. So like we were kind of joking, like, I don't know how many losses we had at the time, but like we didn't think we were going to lose another game like rest of the season. Yeah, it was special to get the 11th. It's kind of a little Christmas present, like I guess to myself, getting like everyone likes an OT winner, so it was special to not tie the record but go and get the 11th, so you have the new record. But I remember that game was in Watertown, like there was a lot of fans there, so it went pretty silent once that went in. So it was
I want to share my screen so I can show something to you. We were talking about your days in college, and you guys may not know it from looking at this fresh face, neatly trimmed, but this guy had some lettuce back in the day. That is some serious Samson flow right there.
Those are the golden days with the golden locks. When you're in college, you want to have the flow outside the bucket, and I remember I played lacrosse as well in college, so they go hand in hand. Like, you need the lettuce, as they say. I didn't even notice how long it was until you look at the picture. Like, holy smokes, it was down to my shoulders. Like, what was I doing, and why did anyone interact with me? So, and I was always the guy who would, like, a lot of people had long hair or flow in college or in junior, and I would always cheer people for cutting it and say, no, you're such a loser with your short hair. And then eventually I folded. But yeah, every now and then I miss it, but we'll save it for a blast in the past, and we'll leave it at that.
So during quarantine, there's no danger of you growing out the hair ever again?
No, the only time, like my first year pro, I played in Europe. Where I would play in Europe, it was Budapest. Like, they don't speak a whole lot of English. And I didn't really trust anyone to cut my hair because I couldn't really like look up reviews because nothing was in English. So I grew up my hair for like most of the season. That was like 4 years ago, and I haven't been tempted since. So
I don't want you to think that I'm picking on you here. So I want to show you what I used to dead serious roll around with. That was a young Casey Bryant. Look at this.
It's something. Like, I'm a little speechless right now, lost for words. It's got potential. It's got to go back a little bit more. Like, it's too much to the side. Like, you gotta run it through your fingers through the hair and push it back, and then you tuck it behind the ears, and you wear a hat for the day. So it just kind of, you're training your hair with the flow. Like, people think it's all natural. Like, no, it's a process. It's a training thing. You got to work at it. It's all about looking the part. Style is 90% of the game. You gotta look the part. You look good, you feel good, you play good. It all goes hand in hand.
Exactly. Well, Carter, before I let you go here, there are so many fans that are out there waiting to cheer you guys on again. Is there anything that you would like to say to our Hat Tricks fans who are patiently waiting to cheer you on?
Just hold on tight. Like, we'll come eventually. I was actually thinking about this, Casey. Like, hockey's not happening right now because there's no fans are allowed in the building. So, like, the fans in the building are a huge driving force of us being able to do what we want to do. Without fans, there's no hockey unless you're in the NHL on a bubble. But in minor pro, there's not. It's just not really feasible. So we need the fans. We need you guys when we come back. Like, any hockey player can say, there's a difference between playing in a full rink and an empty rink. And the days which I want to say 90%, where we have a full rink and we're jam-packed, 102 is going crazy. Like, it makes a difference. You just kind of feel the energy of the crowd. You have a little extra pep in your step, whether it's blocking a shot, making a big hit, scoring a goal, a nice play, fight, or whatever. When you feel the energy, it's like being on a power play. Like, you kind of feel that extra person, and we appreciate it. Hold on tight. We are coming eventually. Lights at the end of the tunnel, so we can't wait. And just, again, thank you for last year, and can't wait to see you guys again.
Well, Shanksy, this was great. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you back out in the ES soon, bud.
Absolutely. Thanks, Casey.
The Hat City Hockey Show is presented by the Danbury Hat Tricks. Follow @Danbury Hat Tricks on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to youtube.com/Danbury Hat Tricks.
Our next guest on the Hat City Hockey Show spent 7 seasons as the voice of the Houston Astros. You can now find him at the University of Arkansas on ESPNU and on Touchdown Radio. Please welcome Brett Dolan. I appreciate that when Herm asks for a favor, you're still a good favor enough to say yes.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen him, but I can't turn him down.
It looks like you got a nice little setup there. You got a good bat collection.
Well, I got bats, and then we got what do we got? That's Craig Biggio there. I think that's Roger Clemens there.
Whew.
Nolan Ryan and Sandberger in the other room. So
You ever take any of those out for a little BP?
not those, no.
The first thing I always ask people, Brett, on the show is what they've been doing to keep sane through the whole process, what they've been watching, reading, listening to that has kind of kept them going through this whole ordeal.
Boy, it's been tough. Sanity has been hard to come by when you're used to doing games and events and getting on airplanes. And of course, that's all gone out the door. No airplane trips and no hotels and no games and baseball, basketball, football. So I tried to get back to do a little bit of reading, but there's a TV show that I've gotten hooked on that I probably never would have before called Moonshiners on Discovery. So if you haven't seen Moonshiners, you might want to tune in. It's worth a couple of hours of your time.
Discovery, all right? That's a new one. The way I got in contact with you was through our managing partner, Herm Sorcher, a local celebrity here in Danbury. How did you two cross paths initially?
We never actually worked together, but we share the same beginning point in minor league baseball in Beloit, Wisconsin. And it's almost like a fraternity hazing situation where if you've survived Beloit, you've thrived, you've made it out, you're part of the tradition, I guess. You're part of the fraternity. So we missed each other by a year or so, but we've come across each other throughout the world of professional sports, and there aren't many people quite like him.
That is true. That is very true. I can attest to that. You have a very fascinating career in broadcasting because in looking you up and looking down the list of your credits and your background, you sort of embody the broadcaster's dream. You went from small town, middle America, Iowa, to the MLB and to SEC sports. In a town whose population wouldn't fill 2 sections of Danbury Arena with no pro sports around, who did you listen to on the radio that made you think, this is what I want to do?
It's funny. I didn't even have cable television until I went off to college at the University of Iowa. So it was the old 3 stations flip between 5 and 8 and 13. Or you jump on the radio. And for me, growing up in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Iowa, the best part was, as a future radio guy, is that I wasn't limited to one team. I could pick up the Kansas City Royals and the St. Louis Cardinals. I could get the Twins. I could get the Cubs and the White Sox, maybe the Brewers. And I really had this buffet of 5 or 6 different teams that I could listen to. And at the same time, when it came to college football season, back in the old AM radio days, you could find 7, 8 different schools and programs. So I really got this exposure to not only a lot of different broadcasters, but it just whetted my appetite for maybe someday wanting to be on the other side of that radio.
You could pick up a lot of different teams. Was there one in particular where you're like, all right, I got to tune in and listen to this guy?
I was a Royals guy. That was the closest, but it was a treat. On Sundays, we could get the Cubs television network. And actually, one of the guys was Milo Hamilton, who I ended up working with for 7 years in Houston. At the same time, Jack Buck was always a character in St. Louis. So I was a Royals fan. I liked Jack Buck. And it was hard to get away from the lure, and probably still is if you live in Iowa, of the Chicago Cubs.
Casey, Iowa, right?
That's it. Population, but now it's probably down to like 350, 400 now.
At last estimate, it is 400 according to the 2019 census. But just based off of the name, as a Casey myself, I am sure it is a utopian paradise populated with only the smartest people in the world.
We'll let you keep thinking that. Maybe we'll have you back for a parade or something someday.
I'll lead the float. I'll lead the charge. Now, you mentioned your time with the Beloit Snappers in A-ball. When we were talking to Steve Valaquette, who was a goalie for the Rangers for several years, he said that there are days when you're in the minor leagues when you feel so far away from the pros that it's painful. There's an article in the Beloit Daily News that you once slept in the umpire's dressing room. Is that true, and how did that come about?
It most certainly is true, and here's why. Because I don't even know what my salary was back in the days, but let's put it this way. Monthly, it had 3 numbers and not 4, I think, at times. So it was pretty minute, and we would cut expenses in the summer by sharing an apartment with interns. Well, interns leave on Labor Day. They want to get out. They want to go to school or just get out. So at that time, we're like, well, how in the world are we going to pay rent when there's 2 of us instead of 4 of us? And at some time, I think one of my coworkers and I just moved into the clubhouse. And I had the dressing room, the umpire's dressing room. He had the manager's office. The problem is I was on the outside with very little insulation and no heat. So while I had an abundance of closet space and a shower and even the kegerator, I think, that came in from the concession stand, we were missing a few things like a kitchen, a stove, a heat. And again, we had these, we could do laundry till the end of time, which was fine, but we didn't have heat. So I did that for a while. At the same time, I was giving plasma with some of the people that were pretty down on their luck in Beloit, that maybe, didn't have anything, right? They were living under bridges and such. So then they would have a contest there to pick the winners of football games, which I often won. So I was getting my donation money, plus I was winning the football pool because I had at least television to watch the game. So that was just part of my Beloit story. There were 4 years there where I felt like we had everything that could possibly go on. We had a pitcher strike out 5 batters in an inning for the first time in the history of professional baseball as a starter. We got him a Hall of Fame exhibit in Cooperstown. Wow. We had a player retired during a game. We had a situation, too, that was even a little bit bizarre where it's hard to even describe this, where we got some national attention because we only had 4 or 5 people on our front office staff, and we're pulling tarp. And as you can imagine, Wisconsin, a little bit like where you live in April, it's not pleasant. So we had a snowstorm, and we couldn't get the tarp off the field, so we went to a place where there were people who wanted to get outside and had time to help, which was the jail. And we drove 7, 8 prisoners over to help us out, and they were our April MVPs, our most valuable prisoners. So we got a little bit of attention. We had everything but heat. We had great stories. We had great storylines. We just worked crazy hours, and we just tried to survive.
I feel like everyone who goes through the minor league ringer has that experience that's like, all right, that'll make a great chapter in the book one day. You could write an entire book based off of what you just told me. That's unbelievable.
The funny part is, I think, Casey, there's a lot of people that rise very quickly now in our profession. And that didn't happen when I was starting. And not to be the old curmudgeon, but if you wanted to be in Major League Baseball, you spent several years in the minors, you worked your way up, and you paid your dues, and you had stories to tell. And now it seems like there are some people that come out of college so qualified and so good that maybe they spent a year or two and they're in the big leagues at age 28. Even Joe Davis, who's a Beloit guy, I kid him, he talks about his minor league experience and what he learned of 2 years or 3 years. I spent 12 years. So my list of stories becomes pretty significant compared to the cast of guys now that are so talented that they just sprint through the minors and maybe don't have quite the dues paying process that a few of us did when we were there in the early 90s into the 2000s.
You're pulling a back in my day when you had to do, afternoons at high school sporting events and then evening in the minor league, because you also were in Platteville, Wisconsin, calling high school games too. There, you're really making the rounds, getting your reps.
Well, the funny part about Platteville was we'd also did Division III basketball, and at the time they had this good coach, right? He was on his way up. He was winning Division III national championships. That was Bo Ryan, who of course went on to Wisconsin and had a pretty good career there too, getting to Final Fours and deep runs in the tournament. So, but I don't think we ever truly forget some of those initial jobs and our starting points, especially if it has a happy ending to it. But if nothing else, I think we find out how much we like it, working in sports, chasing a broadcasting dream, or being in the minor leagues. Because if you don't like it, going through some of those things where you're working crazy hours and you're pulling tarp with snow and you don't have heat because you're living in the umpire's dressing room, or you're giving plasma to make ends meet, you probably aren't going to last very long.
Is there a nightmarish road trip that you remember? We
did have a bus trip in Beloit where the bus broke down somewhere on the way to Peoria in the middle of Illinois. And we had our best pitcher was a mechanic, and he actually fixed the thing after a period of time. So they were sending another bus, but he earned a save that day, even though he wasn't pitching, because he got the bus back on the road. But in AAA, you would fly day of game, and inevitably there would be issues. There was one 4th of July where we flew into New Orleans, Louisiana, and I don't know where we were coming from. This was when I was with the Tucson, Arizona team. And we had this young prospect who was supposed to meet us there. The problem was he was there, we weren't there. And we ended up rolling in, and we see the stadium is jam-packed in Louisiana. And they have their way of kind of passing the time. But they were a little bit fired up because the game was supposed to start at 6. It's 7 o'clock. We're not starting to 8. The pitcher was Brandon Webb, who ended up winning a Cy Young. And poor Webby, it took him about 40 pitches to get through that first inning, but then he was fine after that. But, I mean, we were in the airport for 14 hours that day, and we land and we play at 8 o'clock at night, and There was always a few of those stories where you're wondering, how in the world has this not happen on a more regular basis?
When you do eventually make your way to the MLB, you did spend some time working with the Montreal Expos in the 2003 and 2004 seasons, which is incredibly unique because that was the end of the line for the Montreal Expos. Granted, you weren't their full-time guy yet, but what is it like covering a team when it's really being phased out like that?
They were still competitive. They had Frank Robinson. They still had Vladimir Guerrero. And it was a little bit sad because you knew that there were changes coming, whether it was going to be Washington or there was going to be something different. Ironically, I never made it to Montreal. I would join the team at times in the States, in Cincinnati, Kansas City, Phoenix on multiple occasions, in Denver and Colorado. And I didn't get the true flavor of what it was like for a community, a province, a country that was losing its team. But I mean, I could see a day where I don't know if Tampa Bay will end up there for some games or there's some way of adding a team. I still think they could be a major league city. It would have to be with a new stadium. And obviously our current economic situation is not one where there's a lot of individuals or municipalities willing to take great gambles, but never say never, I guess.
The Houston Astros bring you in 2006. The team is fresh off of its World Series run in 2005. And speaking of legends, you have plenty around that complex in Houston. You've got Biggio, Berkman, Clemens, Pettit, Oswalt. You've got so many legends of the game on that team. It has to be so nice to walk into a clubhouse on day one and know you've got such meat to the story that you get to cover for that organization, perhaps in contrast to at the end of your time there when they were winning 55 games.
Yeah, losing 106 and 107 the last couple of years. I think there's something to that. Obviously, Oswalt was very good. Bagwell's last spring training was my first. Craig Biggio was a year and a half away from getting to 3,000 hits. Lance Berkman was at the top of his game. Andy Pettit was there. Roger Clemens came in mid-season. So there were a lot of very talented players. You knew that you were going to be accepted because these guys were professionals. I mean, these guys were known for being this tremendous clubhouse. This is how they treated everybody. This is how they treated newcomers that were players or coaches. It was a very inviting place. And we came in at probably the height of popularity at that time for the franchise. And unfortunately, they weren't able to get back. And then, as you mentioned, but by the very end, it was a different everything, different ownership group, and certainly a different trajectory. But still very, very thankful that I was able to be there at that time and be around a tremendous group of players and individuals.
They only missed the postseason in that 2006 season by a game and a half. And speaking as a Met fan who was at Game 7 against the division-winning Cardinals, you couldn't have won that extra game and a half? You couldn't have saved us from that heartbreak?
It was close, right? So they won like 7-8 games down the stretch, and all of a sudden they're just trying to get above 500 with this great talent. They have one game left in Atlanta on a Sunday, and Smoltz is only going to pitch if it means something. So it meant something. Smoltz pitched. He won the game. So had Houston won that game, they were going to play the Cardinals in a one-game playoff with Oswalt being able to go. And, of course, the Cardinals, end up winning the World Series, and I think they won something like 83 games that year. So I think had they been able to beat Smoltz on a Sunday in Atlanta, Roy would have had a good chance to beat the Cardinals, and then who knows how it would have shaken out.
Revisionist history. You mentioned your work with Milo Hamilton, who is a legendary broadcaster in the business. I mean, this guy has called a pennant, no-hitters, Hank Aaron's 715th home run, and you're with him for Craig Biggio's 3,000th hit, as you mentioned, which, by the way, I love that Craig was out by like 5 steps going for a double. That's Craig to a T, hustling, chugging around first.
2-0 pitch, swinging, there it is! Biggs wants to make it a double, and he's going to be out.
That moment being in the booth, granted you weren't on play-by-play, but there's a reason for that. What was it like being in the booth?
It was exciting. I think the thought was, in a year that wasn't going anywhere from the team standpoint, everybody wanted to see Craig do it at home. Well, that takes some maneuvering because, Stan Musial got his in Chicago and they wanted him to do it in St. Louis. You just can't stop at times and pause so the player can return home. I think Craig was 5 away from 3,000 when we started a series and a homestand, and I was in the booth with Milo, and we were waiting for some type of edict or order, and there was none. So I'm like, well, what do I do if Craig comes to the plate at 2.999 when I'm calling the inning? So finally, I just called Milo up that morning, and I said, hey, if that happens, you take over. And we were thinking, well, maybe tomorrow. Or it happened that night in the 7th inning, as Craig was at 2.999. So what would have been my inning or my call, it became Milo's, and it was more appropriate for him to do it. I'd be lying if I didn't say it wouldn't have been nice to try and put my voice on that moment. But it did allow me the chance to do what we rarely are able to do in the course of a broadcast, and that is simply observe and to sit back and watch the moment unfold. And I was a little bit anxious and excited myself, even though I had nothing to do with it, just because of the magnitude, the history.
Is there anything in particular that you learned or gleaned from working with a guy like that, Milo Hamilton?
His preparation was very important to him, and mine was too. Now, our preparation was different, and I think that was always hard for him to understand. But I think what I probably learned the most was watching him MC events. And that's a big part, at least it was when I was here in the job in Houston, as far as being active in the community, MCing events big and small, whether it's galas, luncheons, or just Rotary meetings, and to watch him be light on his feet, command the room. That's something that I probably spent even more time watching, because it's something I used to do a lot of too, hosting events for 500 people. There was 2,000, I think, in one of the luncheons I did at the minor league baseball winter meetings. But I just enjoyed, I guess the word I use is command, the way he commanded a room.
You did get to kind of leave your mark on baseball on one of the bigger moments of recent years, is that you got to call a perfect game too. You got to call Matt Cain's perfecto. Granted, it was the opposition, but you still get to call one.
I think we knew by the 4th inning. Jim DeShays walked into the booth and said, "Boys, you're going to see a perfect game tonight." And So we were ready for it. There were 2 great plays. Chris Schneider hit a ball to the fence and left. Jordan Schaefer hit one to right center in Triples Alley that the catch was made. Other than that, there was not a lot of threatening to get a base runner. And it was a 10-0 game, so Matt Cain was going to win the game. I think he threw 125 pitches. He started that day by hitting golf balls from home plate into the bay because they were getting ready for the U.S. Open. So either DJ was there, Rory was there. I do take pride in the ability to have said that, I got the chance to call the final 3 innings of a perfect game, because I think at that time it was the 22nd perfect game in big league history. And let's face it, there were 7 or 8 of those before radio even existed, before there even was broadcasting. So I'm glad I was able to have that moment, even though it wasn't our guy.
1 ball and 2 strikes, and the pitch from Cain. A swing and a dribbler down the third baseline. Fielded by Arias. He stumbles. He throws to first. It's in time. This game is over. And Matt Cain is authored the 22nd perfect game in Major League Baseball history.
Moving into your college broadcasting career, because you are one of the most prolific college broadcasters, moving now to the University of Arkansas, and you've called plenty of basketball and football games around the SEC as well. What I love about college broadcasts is often the pairing of broadcasters, right? You get your play-by-play guy and your color guy. And something I actually just watched last night with my father was the Survive in Advance documentary about Jim Valvano's NC State, which relates to one of your color guys in college basketball, Reed Geddes, who is on Phi Slamma Jamma. Is it hard when you're sitting next to a guy who was part of such a storied program? Is it hard to resist kind of nudging him and picking his brain going, hey, what was Hakeem Olajuwon like?
We'd be calling a Houston game, and he'd be talking about the exceptional ability to recruit local guys and in-state guys that were part of this run for Phi Slamma Jamma. And then he would pause and say, with the exception of one Nigerian, meaning Olajuwon. Or I did a women's game at NC State last year, and I tweeted out a picture of their arena, which is now named after Jim Valvano, and the men don't play there, the women do. But all of a sudden he replied, huh? What? Like, don't even bring that up. Don't even mention it.
Your job at Arkansas is kind of like working for the Olympics, because you're hopping from event to event and game to game, and it's always different every passing day. Is there a sport or event that you feel is underrated on the college scene?
Oh, great question. And you're right, I do get a chance to kind of bounce around. The best part is they give me the flexibility when I need to go to do a college football game or an ESPN game to go. At the same sense, I'm around a lot of programs. What I love about that is I love being around different coaches at different sports. We find out, even though they're different sports, different people, a lot of the signature qualities of good leaders are the same thing. I think college softball is a tremendous sport, and I think it's evidenced by the ratings they get for their World Series when we're able to have World Series. I can appreciate the rigors of gymnastics, even though I'd be lying if I told you I understood it. But for me, college softball is a pretty darn good sport. It's crisp, it's quick, it's not a 3.5-hour game, and you still get the power and the dominance in the mound or in the circle. So that would be one. And women's basketball is a game too. I tell people, I know for the most part you don't have dunks, but that's about it. You still have great shooting. To me, too, the game is played at a crisper pace, and it's just I think a better flow, better product at times than the men's when it becomes a foul-a-thon and free throw shooting. So those two sports, I think, are probably a little bit underrated.
One of my best buddies went to college at University of Florida, and he would always rave about going to college softball and college volleyball in the SEC. Because the SEC, it may not be anything to us Northeasterners. I come from Marist College in the MAC. There's not a whole lot to it. Going to an SEC school, every sport matters. And every time you play Bama or Arkansas or Ole Miss or LSU, it matters.
Probably that's evidenced by college baseball. And I think people would recognize that who aren't in the SEC. But I went to school at Iowa where if you had a couple hundred people there for a home game when it's frigid, that was big. But there will be series, and I don't even say it has to be good weather in Fayetteville, as long as it's not miserable. If it's 45 and clear for LSU coming in April, there's going to be 35,000 people there over the course of the 30 games. And the hog pen in left field is going to be packed, and they're going to be grilling. They're going to be tailgating for hours before and afterwards. And the fans don't leave their seats. Not only are there 10, 12 different guys on both teams that will play professional baseball, there's probably 5 or 6 big leaguers. And the fact, again, there's 10,000+ a game over the course of the weekend. So that's pretty intense.
What, in your opinion, is the best rivalry in college sports?
I was out west, and you see weird things. The true hatred, for example, of Arizona State or Oregon State, and some of these that aren't considered big rivalries on a regional basis, and how much they hate each other and dislike each other. But having called 2 of the last 3 Iron Bowls before this year at Auburn, and just to see the spectacle that is Auburn, Alabama, minus 1 day. Let's put it this way. For the entire year, minus 1 day is about the buildup to that game. And then it's about the buildup to the next year's game. It's that intense. It's that important. And when you're part of something, even if you have a role that's completely removed from the wins and the losses or which team does well, that's pretty cool because everybody that's sitting in the stands, everybody that's watching and listening, they have not only a vested interest, but this is going to dictate how the rest of their year unfolds, which is crazy.
And from a broadcast standpoint, I can't imagine an easier environment where you feed off the crowd, because I know that plays into a lot of broadcasts. That has to be just the easiest thing to psych yourself up for in the world, right?
True. If you do allow the crowd on radio to tell part of the story, it becomes the third member of the crew. The one thing I'll say, though, when you go to Auburn, for example, it's not as if the crowd just gets loud on big moments. And they do. They're loud all damn game for 3.5 hours. So it's like being inside a jet engine, too, because everything about it just smells or sounds or feels like a big rivalry game.
Brett, before I let you go, I want to play a quick game here with you. I want to play a game of Price is Right, because I found something on eBay. I want you to see if you can guess the price of this item. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about. This is a rookie card of Brett Dolan with the Beloit Snappers. This can be yours for how much on eBay?
$125.
Oh, you're way low. You're way low. This is a $15 item on eBay.
Oh my! Well, someone's just going crazy right there. The Russians have hacked eBay if that's the case. That is a handsome-looking guy, though, and I don't know about that shirt with that sleeve, or the color of the hair looks a little bit foreign, and that headset looks like something from, the NASA missions in the 1970s.
I tell you, with the green and purple sleeve going on right here, it looks like if you remove the logo on your left chest here, it would be like a tennis shirt. I feel like you're about to play Andre Agassi.
No, you might be onto something. Yeah, that was mid-1990s fashion. That's part of the fun, though. We talked about the memories of minor league sports. That was one. I coached first base a couple of times a year when the Packers knocked me off around Labor Day in uniform. I'll never forget that, but unfortunately, eBay won't let me forget this either.
Well, Brett, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate having you on, and we hope everything is safe and healthy in the Dolan family, and that you have a happy holiday season, and wish you all the best. Hope to see you back in the booth soon in 2021.
Well, many thanks to you, and as well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for everybody who works in sports. It has been a year of challenges, and I'm afraid the challenges aren't quite removed from what's going to take place in the next couple of months. We miss being at the arena. We miss fans in the stands. We miss schedules and games and bus trips. And for everybody who works in pro sports, including yourself, we'll wish for a much better 2021 than we've had to endure here in 2020.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Thanks so much, Brett.
My pleasure.
That'll do it for us here on the Hat City Hockey Show. If you like this episode, be sure to click like and subscribe for future content. We are off next week, but we will be back in 2021. Be good to yourself and others. And on behalf of the entire Hat Tricks organization, thank you for all of your continued support. I'm Casey Bryant. Take care.